Hi everyone, welcome to Module 1, the overview for the course. We will be going over some of the key concepts, some definitions, how they relate to each other, and finally how you can read for this section. So first let's start with paradigms, one of the central concepts for this whole course. Paradigms are ways of knowing that filter and frame what we see and what sense we make of what we see, or the meaning that we connect to what we are seeing. And I have the four primary paradigms that we are going to cover listed here and shown in images. Critical theories draw our attention to the ways that historically and currently inequities and divisiveness and polarization are affecting who is able to have power to make decisions, as well as the various personal reactions that people are having that also influences how we see the world. So what I encourage you to think about is which frameworks, which ways of knowing do you personally tend to gravitate towards as best as you are aware of them now? And I am aware that I tend to gravitate towards critical theory. And I can also move towards pragmatism, where trying to find an effective solution for our current challenge is super important to me. So here you have some more formal definitions of paradigms. And noticing that paradigms draw a boundary. They help screen in and screen out what we pay attention to, what we make sense of. Similarly, heuristics also draw our attention to certain pieces of information and also help us pay less attention to others. Heuristics are more directly related to our actions, our behaviors, whether it's in professional practice or in our personal life. So for example, we have heuristics that help us assess for suicide or risk of homicide, or substance use, or how we come to understand or formulate a problem that a client has when coming to meet with us. Now, also related to paradigms are these two words, ontology and epistemology. Ontology is the focus of the field of philosophy, and it focuses in on what's reality, how do we understand truth, is there a singular truth, multiple truths, what can we know about the world, about ourselves, is there a reality external to us? So these large questions are addressed by philosophy. Those assumptions are embedded into the paradigms, and we'll highlight them briefly just so that you have them anchored into your understanding. What we'll spend more attention on, however, is epistemology. Epistemology says, how do we come to know the world? And what's the relationship between us as people who are trying to develop and deepen understandings and what we're trying to understand? So Denzin and Lincoln, who are qualitative researchers, also highlight the fact that every epistemology, every approach of how we come to understand also has embedded within it ethics, that we have a moral stance about how we are viewing the world. So the key thing for now is just to be aware that all paradigms have assumptions that relate to ontology and epistemology. And then finally, things that you might be a little more familiar with are values, what we think is desirable, important, meaningful, or good, and then bias. Bias is a human preference for or against specific things, actions, or groups of people. And we can think about values and bias for individuals and cultures and organizations, as well as for our profession. So if we put this all together, Dr. Daria Fuentes helps us see that both individually and as a profession, there are ways of seeing and knowing, there are beliefs and assumptions that are below ground, that are surrounding the roots, that are feeding the tree. And the trunk and branches of the tree can be understood as how we see ourselves, the specific values that we have, a particular identity that we might have, the ways that we are, specific policies. And then when we move out to the leaves, that's where the action is. So individually, culturally, organizationally, we have procedures, we have norms, we have patterns of communicating, we have informal and formal ways of interacting and communicating, how we do things. And what we notice is that the ways that we or others act, individually or collectively, is not always in alignment with what we say we do or value, or in alignment with what we fundamentally believe. So, for example, many social workers say, I'm a good person, and I just really respect every human being. And yet, we know from research that implicit bias is a given for all of us because of the smog that we inhale culturally through dominant US society and other groups of people. So this course then, and looking at paradigms, is going to help us excavate, go deeply, go under the surface to come to intentionally be more aware of the frames of mind that we are using, what paradigms are we using, and we're also going to build capacity to intentionally make choices about which paradigms best suit our purposes for those that we work with as well as those in the rest of our lives. So finally, here's how I encourage you to read and reflect for Module 1. Happy reading!